Hey everybody, it's Omar with Galena Capital Partners, and I'm back again with a video update, this time for 912 to 920 King Street. So in our last video, I told you we were headed towards our second BAR concept hearing. I'm excited to tell you that we had that hearing and that the designs that we presented were unanimously approved for mass, scale, and architectural character. What that means is that the Architectural Review Board believes that the buildings that we are proposing fit in with the overall neighborhood context. So with this step behind us, what we can do is move on to some more detailed design and engineering, which we're going to need as we go through the process with the Planning Commission, the City Council, and eventually through building permits. But before we get to any of that, there's a summer's worth of work to do. And so what I wanted to do today was share with you the recap of that video in which we presented the latest concept to the BAR, including the changes that was based on your feedback and the feedback of staff and the board. So I'm going to cut right into the presentation now. I just want to remind you of one last thing. We'd love to hear your feedback on all of this. As always, the door's open. There are 3 good ways to get in touch with us. We have a phone number that you can call or text. We have an email address, and we have a Twitter account. All of those can be found down below this video in the description box, so please go ahead and get in touch with us and let us know what you think. Enjoy the video, and I'll be back soon with another update.
So you guys remember that we have 2 projects here that are independent because the contexts are independent and the language is a little bit independent as well. So the first one we're going to look at is at King Street. Next slide, Lee. And here you can see the basic parameters between these 2 sites. One is on King Street between Patrick and Alfred, and the other is in the mid block between Henry and Patrick. But we're going to talk about the King Street site first. Okay, next slide, Lee. So you might also remember that one of the approaches that we took here is that we pulled the building back from the east, and we left an open space along the side there to just give a little light and air and between the existing building. Next slide. We had originally come to you with the idea of a layered building along the whole site, and there was discomfort with the size of the building and the width of it along King Street. So we separated the buildings into 2 buildings, as you see here. And then we started modifying both buildings to really have independent characters by one side, on the east side, pushing the building back slightly. And of course, we have the transformer that we had to knock out on the ground floor. Go up. And on and sorry, Lee, go back one. And you'll remember also that the open space that we have on the side of the building, we are activating by putting the lobby on the side and the amenity space also looking out into that open space. Next slide. And as the building moves up, we are modifying the east side of the building to give it more character. We're pushing it in, and we have a little bit of a setback as the building goes up. And on the 4th floor, we continue to push the building in, and so we have this kind of terraced area that on the west side. We also push the building back up here to again separate these buildings from a massing perspective, and that setback up there is now 9 feet, so it is contributing to our open space calculation. And in the concept 1 submission, you remember that we stepped the building back slightly, trying to alleviate a little bit of the concern of height. And this was the presentation, but now in the concept 2, next slide, you can see that we've changed our approach from the kind of horizontal expression of the building into one that's more episodic along King Street. And we did an asymmetrical breakdown of the King Street facade so that it reinforced the individuality of the components. Next slide. And again, this is concept 1 submission where we were really lining up the buildings with the existing fabric. Next slide. And now we modified that to make the building on the east side, terrace it back so that we got a little bit more daylight in the open space on the east side. And then on the west side, we just really tried to do a very calm facade And we've been going back and forth with the staff on all the individual details, and we'll take you into those details. So that shows that we pushed the fourth floor back on the west side so that the buildings really don't line up, and so they feel very much like different buildings. And on the east side, we've kept the terraced quality setbacks to give it a more vertical feeling and to just distinguish it from its adjacent parts. On the concept two submission that we had before, one of the staff comments that came back was that they very much liked the layout of the kind of general facade, but they felt as if the lower level should have more of a symmetry to it on the floors above the ground floor. And what you can see here is the revised fenestration on the lower side, which we've done two things. We've modified the midsection of the building so that now the windows are symmetrical as staff requested. And we have now also modified the lower level as well so that there was more consistency in the bays on that lower side. Obviously, the whole point here was that the east building was asymmetrical and the west building was symmetrical. So again, distinguishing them from the parts. Next slide. And then another comment that we readily embraced was the idea that this block or this massing should have a little bit more of a cornice and a little bit more of a distinction to kind of really just lock it down because the setback was so strong on the top. And so we've worked within the architectural language of the entire building, and we are indicating here a cornice through a different color of the coining or of the banding on the building. And I think you'll see it. Yeah, you can see it here that we've just indicated a lighter color, similar to the one on the left hand side here, where we frankly just reversed the brick colors and carried the pinstriping. We thought that the language would be consistent, but it would certainly be different enough, and it would terminate that third floor in a way in which I think we all agreed was appropriate. Next slide. Now, down on the base, one of the comments or concerns that we were dealing with, you may remember, was that we didn't meet the King Street retail percentage of glazing along the street frontage, where we originally you were supposed to meet 75%. We originally had 70%. We have brought that number up to 72%. So we still haven't met the requirement, but as we stated previously, based on the general quality of the design, we're concerned about increasing the amount of glazing and decreasing the massing of the columns, thereby frankly undercutting the visual weight of the building. And we were just uncomfortable. We believe that we've gotten very, very close, and we think that the architecture is quite strong. And we'd like your permission to go at the 72% versus the required 75%. Next slide. Now, one of the other comments, and we've had this discussion in all the two on twos, was staff's concern that any artwork that would go in the open space to the east was visible from the street, and the idea is that we would work with staff on some potential art wall lighting, excuse me, or art wall with lighting. That we would work with staff, and we're totally on board with that. We want this to be exciting and something interesting, and we would like people to come down, walk down the open space, and feel the context of Old Town with all its fabric. And so that's really our submission for the Concept 2 hearing, and I'll stop there and field questions.